Star Trek 57, M23, take 2.
It's got Star Trek. Episode 61. Enterprise, Season 4, Episode 17. Bound.
May I ask you something? Do you find me attractive?
I'd be lying if I said no.
I've known so few honest men. And even though you don't wish to own me, I still wish to please you. If I choose to do this, would that violate your ship's protocol?
Unnecessarily.
So, I think we are warmed up. Did we make our funny noises? Okay. I think that means we're about ready to go.
This is episode 61.
Is it Gary Oldman or Benny Youngman?
All right. All right. It's time to start the show.
Now you're in a rush.
Now it's
No, I'm
time
not in a
for the
rush.
show.
But I just felt it. I felt the vibe in the ether that that's time to go.
This
Time to start.
episode takes place on December 27th, 2154.
All right. And by this episode,
Yeah.
you
what
mean...
Did what did they do on Christmas?
Which episode do you mean?
I mean,
We got to announce the name of the episode.
it's season 4, episode 17 of Star Trek Enterprise.
Yeah, but that's not the name of the episode.
But I mean, that's enough information.
Bound.
Yes, Bound.
Bound.
We are
Not like the Homeward variety.
talking about Bound. I don't even know how we got that spring jingle because we don't even have things with spring.
Yeah, how did that happen?
Spring jingle?
Don't worry about it.
I knocked into something by accident.
Oh, yeah.
So
I know what
we,
you're talking
yes,
about.
Bound. Yes, Bound. We are
Homeward.
talking about Bound.
Homeward.
Not Homeward Bound, not with the dog, the cat, and the other dog.
Paul
What
Simon.
about Milo and Otis?
No, Milo and Otis was a dog and a cat.
Oh. And they all died in each one.
That's a Paul Simon song.
Yes,
No, I think those were happy movies. I think.
Yeah, except Milo and Otis, I understand that they kind of tortured the animals.
Oh yeah,
a
in
little
real
bit.
life they were horrible, but as far as
real
the
life
plot
horrible.
goes, yeah.
The plot was quite nice.
Yeah.
Dudley Moore and whatnot.
But in real life they were throwing cats off cliffs and things.
But that's not this. This is neither Homeward Bound nor is this Milo and Otis.
No.
Where it is Bound, episode 17 of the 4th season of Enterprise, and we will be talking about that on this show that you are currently listening to, the It's Got Star Trek podcast. Whoa. And we are currently on episode number what of that podcast, Jesse?
I think it's 61.
You are correct. It is episode 61 of the It's Got Star Trek
More
podcast.
like real big fun.
Because the last time I took notes on something, it was for episode 59, and then what people heard as episode 60 was one we had already done like 2 years ago or something.
Yeah, a year and a half ago. This is a secret episode.
A year and 2 months
And that was
ago.
last week's episode on Mirror Mirror when we have such youthful and optimistic outlooks on life. We had not yet been crushed by the world.
I was getting there.
Yeah. Well, yeah. No, it was moving in that direction.
I'm pretty crushed by the world right now.
No, now we are. But in the Mirror Mirror episode, that was recorded in December of 2019.
We didn't know what we were in for.
Things were shitty, but they weren't, you know.
Yeah, I think it's starting to finally get to me. It's just like, what's the point of doing anything? Right?
I know, right? We're decompressing from the horror, but
Just keep on pushing through.
one way we can decompress is by doing podcasts and listening to podcasts and watching Star Trek. And this is a particularly interesting one. Bound.
I was watching that one this week.
Yeah, you were watching because that's what
Go
we're talking
figure.
about. I hope you watched it.
Was this supposed to be some kind of TOS throwback or something?
Okay, so yeah, like in a couple notes, production notes about this. So this
number of levels.
This first aired on April 15th of 2005.
I turned an age that day.
Yes, that's your birthday.
Shit, that's still too much information to be given out.
I know. Now you're all your money's gone, Dan.
2005.
I'm gonna get doxxed.
You've been doxxed.
What were you, 25?
You've been doxxed like a dachshund. That's not much of a joke. I'll admit that.
Jesse, I just said I don't want to give away my age on the air, so you proceeded to ask me how old I was.
Nobody was listening.
No, that's not the answer to that's not the response to the statement I just made.
I don't think I was listening to what you were saying.
You don't get to tell me that my request is invalid about what I
No,
want to
I
reveal
don't.
about myself.
All right. Well, we'll politely ask folks not to dox Dan.
Don't dox
There's not much that is going to get you.
In the future, someone could look back into our archives. And
True. In the future, if you are listening now, this is going to be released on Saturday, January 23rd. If 2021. If you're listening to it now, not worth much. Quite probably, if you hold on to this information and then dox Dan, 20 years in the future, there might be some benefit.
You know what? I got confused. That's not my birthday. That's tax day.
Oh, that's right.
All right, we'll leave it at that. And so April 15th, that's when it first aired on tax day. And it was written by Manny Coto. And Manny Coto.
How many of those Kotos were there?
Manny Coto.
There were many of them.
At this stage in Enterprise, he became the showrunner in season 4 because I always recommend Enterprise. I think people should watch Enterprise, but it is a show that you see some of the seams, you see some of the production issues, and it's not just that there were production quote unquote issues. The timing was weird for this show. Star Trek had been on since 1987, so there was a certain amount of fatigue. Battlestar Galactica and other shows were coming out that were really pushing the envelope in terms of storytelling and world building and special effects and all that stuff. And this was a prequel that came out after the Star Wars prequels. So there was, or like around the same time as the Star Wars prequels.
Well, when I look at Enterprise, I remember looking at it now, I think compared to Discovery and stuff, I'm like, yeah, this seems like more like classic Trek. But then I remember when it came out, I was like, wow, this is totally different vibe.
Fucking widescreen.
Yeah, everything felt different about Enterprise. And now when I look back on it, I'm like, oh, that's more like the old Trek.
You can feel it. You can, yeah. And
so I had to remind myself, it's like, no, that's not how you felt back then. And like, so it's kind of interesting. Yeah. Was it just the widescreen? I guess
it's the direction style and everything. But the other thing that was happening at this time was Enterprise, the first season was conceived, largely filmed and everything prior to the September 11th attacks in New York and DC, right? The 2001 September 11th attacks. And it aired like right around that time, right? And so the bulk of the show occurred in that period afterwards. And as we know, Star Trek, I mean, entertainment in general, but certainly Star Trek has a tendency to reflect the times it's in, either in reaction to or, is influenced by. And I think we see a lot of that in Enterprise, where we see a lot of storylines that are related to terrorism and, questions of war and stuff. Suliban, although the Suliban they came up with prior to the Taliban being an issue after 2001, but they're probably, but it's still probably related to the Taliban because the Taliban were in the news prior to September 11th. They were more in the news afterwards when it was revealed that they were, giving Osama bin Laden and other folks a place to stay. But anyway, that's the socio-political context that Enterprise takes place in, which I think explains why this particular episode, which was late in the series, it was written by Manny Coto, who went on to work for, he worked on 24, he worked on Dexter. He was considered a very good showrunner, very good writer, very popular in that period. But this show, Bound, is kind of interesting because it's Star Trek, but it's like what white men in the mid-2000s thought was a version of woke feminism.
Yes, that's the main thing.
That's what they thought was being woke.
Yeah,
it was like, oh, the women are actually in charge.
Right. It's like, it doesn't matter that the way they're depicted is how classic media depicts women who are, or people who are enslaved and oppressed. They're being depicted in the exact same way as traditionally the enslaved women would be depicted. But yeah, now though, it's like, oh no, but it's like,
they use chemicals and feminine wiles to trick the men into doing their bidding, which is not. Just to mark this down, that is not a feminist perspective. Yeah. That is something that happened in history, and it happened in history because of the constraints put on the power women were able to wield in many cultures. So that's not feminism to say, oh, women.
And then the human women just get a bunch of headaches and stuff.
Like, because there's competition. They didn't bring. Of course, they didn't bring up like how does a gay man or woman react.
Well, right. There's just no gay people at all.
And they didn't really approach that stuff too much
No,
back then, I guess.
and particularly that they touched on it a little in TNG and DS9 in particular, little hints of it, but Enterprise sort of got rid of that. Now Enterprise is a progressive show in that even when it came to the terrorist stuff, sometimes it leaned a little bit too like rah pro-military, but other times they had episodes that focused on the idea that, for example, not all Suliban were bad guys. In fact, the vast majority weren't. It was a small cabal of Suliban who were doing the shady stuff in the
cabal.
And they make that point, And then there's the episode that we discussed previously, Desert Crossing, which has some similar questions about the world is more complicated than good guys and bad guys,
Right.
and the power differentials are an important component and all that.
I mean, I believe they were trying to be woke in some aspect, but it also seemed like it seemed like
they were trying.
But on another side too, in addition to trying, it feels like maybe the writers based a lot of this stuff on their own insecurities. Yeah. They kind of put them together, and instead they put them at the fault of women as like a woman's evil makes men powerless, and it sort of like promotes the idea that you can't blame men for their actions when they're all horned up, basically.
Yes.
And so that's where it kind of gets gets kind of shady, and why the wokeness doesn't work.
I think there are various angles where the wokeness doesn't work, but I do believe that they thought they were coming from the perspective, I think seemingly sincere, that they're like, look at this, we're going to do this trick where in the 60s they had the Orion slave girl, and that is not considered woke. I mean, of course, the term didn't exist then. That's not considered a sort of progressive feminist attitude. So we're going to reverse it. And that's the hook that they rely on in this episode. The big twist in this episode, it's not much of a twist if you ask me, but the big twist is the women are the men are the slaves the whole time. And it turns out the women are the leaders.
Well, in Starfleet, in TOS, the women are just mostly making coffee and the coffee on the bridge.
Well, there was of course
after the pilot, after
the pilot, they're actually doing stuff.
There's I mentioned this before, the TAS episode we did where they went to the planet of women that had control over
white women.
That's
white women.
White women. So I mean,
blonde white women.
Yeah, this is very reminiscent.
I mean, yeah. So race of all white blonde women aside, what do you think was really? Do you think the Enterprise one was really any more progressive than that?
I think it was way less progressive.
Yeah. See,
because the TAS when they were rescued by
the women on the ship,
and the women on the ship, it wasn't like some it was the women got together, Uhura, and they got a plan, and they're like, we're gonna fuck these white bitches up, and they did.
Yeah,
that was awesome. They just went down there, and the white women in the Lorelei signal were all like, we're gonna do magic, and they're like, oh, our magic's not working on you, and they're like, yeah, because we are women and fuck you.
Yeah.
Although you could argue to a certain in a metaphorical sense, it's not like it's more progressive than the Enterprise episode, but it's still, you could interpret it as you ain't going to take our man. So it's like, yes, the women save the Enterprise men, but there is that, I have heard that argument that the progressiveness is limited by the fact that the women are like, those are our men. Yeah. You can't have them.
And as Jesse mentioned, it's kind of funny that the pheromone made men just like completely sweaty and horned up. It made Phlox really sleepy for some reason.
Yeah.
but then the women, it just kind of made him have a headache and kind of listless and just kind of like, oh, I'm so sick of these people. But like so the men were so horny they couldn't concentrate, and the women were so sick of like these Orion women that they couldn't concentrate either, but it was for different reasons. It was all just sort of like basic sexual roles essentially,
and simplified and unscientific, because I know exactly what happened in the writer's room. Right, the writer's room, somebody came up with an idea and they said, I got a great idea. What if we get some Orion slave girls who are really hot and attractive? The network's gonna love that. And they make all the males in the they show up on the Enterprise and they make all the males go crazy, and there's some scheme they're up to. And then people were like, yeah, but the problem is, these are Starfleet people, they're honorable, they should be trained against this, shouldn't be a problem. They're like, I know.
That's early Starfleet, though. They don't have any rules.
True, but it's like there's a pheromone. They've got chemicals. And then they're like, all right, yeah, pheromones are in the news. We can use pheromones. And it's like, well, how does it affect like Phlox and Vulcans? And,
right.
And they're like, I don't know, gives them headaches, makes them sleepy. I just think they didn't think through like what they were so in love with the idea of Captain Archer just being fucking horny and sweaty.
Yeah.
That they were going to move forward with it regardless.
Like, yeah, the Phlox thing was really weird. There was no sort of like, why bother with that effect? Why might as well just not make it affect him either? But like, it was funny to see him all like sped up, like he kept shooting himself with stimulants like the whole time. And
that was funny.
There was one scene where he was just like talking about, he's staying awake with stimulants, and right there he just pops himself in the neck.
They use like fake sort of sweat makeup. I was reading.
Is it glycerin or something?
It's, some kind of glistening action, and then like lots of scar. I guess Tucker's got that big mark on his face.
Oh yeah, because he got punched in the face
when he was fighting with that other dude.
There was a weird
Tucker the Third.
There was a weird horny men in the gym scene. Where they have to like they have to
Reed and Mayweather, right?
Yeah.
The guy's talking about the Deltons.
He was like they had to like lift heavy weights to be men because it helps them deal with all the hot babes or something. I was just gonna say about Mayweather and his dad. There's weird conversation about that where it's like, don't masturbate. Let's just be horny together in the gym or something.
And
with his dad.
I was gonna say precisely that. The Mayweather's anecdote, which is okay. So Mayweather, firstly, when this show was first airing, I found Mayweather kind of boring. As time has gone on, I actually find him to be a much more interesting character in his sort of bubbly outlook. In the face of all this stuff that's going around, like there's good stuff to be found there. And it was so weird in that little anecdote he gave, because the anecdote reads as a kind of a fun little like, oh, dad and son story. But as you note, when you translate it, right, the subtext of that is his dad came in and said, you shouldn't jerk off. If you don't want to jerk off, just lift weights. And then Reed was like, did it work? And then Mayweather says like, well, it helped my biceps, which means he jerked off.
It didn't work.
Which means his dad was like, you shouldn't jerk off, work out. And then he was like, I'm going to jerk off anyway. That's
with
the plot.
Big biceps.
I know, that's the plot of that story. And then Reed's all like, doing his best. Like, he's like, oh, I'm going to try my best here.
Phlox actually, I always expect him to be a little bit sort of above board. Is that the right term? I don't know. On all this stuff, maybe that's not the right word. But he actually shames Hoshi for noticing that all the men are being ridiculous.
Because this is not a progressive episode.
Right. He calls her jealous. He's like, oh, it's,
Right. I wouldn't expect you to be jealous.
Right. He's basically saying, like, as if it's normal and okay for men to perform poorly at their jobs the minute some hot babes show up. That's all I can think to say is some hot babes were around, and suddenly that's what got them. And Hoshi was shamed because she doesn't realize that men can't control it and nothing is their fault when they're really, really horny, and so he ends up calling her jealous. And
quick side note, we don't want to offend or disgust our audience, but just out of curiosity, have either of you ever been, and we are all cis males here, ostensibly heterosexual cis
now
males.
I'm definitely getting doxxed.
Have you ever gotten so horny that sweat started pouring down your body? I'm not saying it can't happen. It's just not. I mean, maybe I've been missing out.
I don't think so.
I don't know that I've ever been in a situation where I was just pouring, like just dripping sweat.
Yeah, that's how powerful it is. And they never really rolled with that sort of storyline ever again.
No.
Like, what's her name? Syra from Discovery. Yeah, she didn't have any of that going on.
Now,
so is it something they have to turn on, or is it just a natural pheromone?
I think
Syra didn't mess with any of that.
The legacy of
or Tendi.
The legacy of this story, I think, is worth briefly discussing. In that, we didn't see many Orions prior to this point. Right, there were Orions and TOS. There are occasional glimpses here and there.
It's really just the cage and then Menagerie,
pretty much. Yeah. And then in Deep Space Nine, you hear a lot about the Orion Syndicate, but not. You don't actually. It's always something you interact with at a distance. You're always interacting with intermediaries with the Orion Syndicate in Deep Space Nine. So in Enterprise, there are a few episodes where they go deep, they go hard, for lack of a better term, into the dealing directly with the Orions. They reference it in this episode where previously they end up on this trading post station and then some people get captured and stuff. That's a pretty entertaining episode. But they do add to the Orion lore on Enterprise. And this episode, the pheromone thing, I don't believe ever comes up again. Maybe in the novels or something, but not in an on-screen
It's
thing.
got to have come up in the novels. It always, whenever there's a question
Yeah.
of when something's ever come up again, it's
You're
like
right.
the novels
Oh,
always
yeah.
make sure to like,
I'd bet-
like
I would bet
remember
money on
this?
that,
Yeah.
And if any audience members out there who are more familiar with the novels, let us know if there's a particular novel or set of novels that would be worth looking at to get into the Orion lore.
I bet Tarek knows.
But the Orion, there are things that continue on from this episode that I do think you could argue have been influenced by this episode regarding Orion culture, as we've seen it in Discovery and as we've seen it in the short trek. There was the Escape Artist short trek with Harry Mudd, which is one of my favorite of the short treks. There's a brief scene that involves some Orions there, and in that situation, the female Orion is the one that seems to be in charge, and the male Orion is her henchman, basically. And with Osira, we see that because Osira is herself a leader, but we
Right.
see her bossing around. What was the name of her nephew?
Talor?
Talor. Yeah, so we see her bossing around nephew. So we see this dynamic.
That's true.
It is a shift in the Orion dynamic as we understood it. So there are things that came out of this episode that I think you'd argue are positive and interesting developments to Orion culture. But yes, I think they've forgotten about this whole pheromone thing because it's a little weird.
Yeah, where can you really go with that? And that's kind of like, how can you formulate any kind of episode? At this
I also
point with
think
that?
it's a matter of pheromones were real pop. Pheromones are a real thing, but there was a real pop science around pheromones in the late 90s and early 2000s, and everyone's like pheromones, and then the scientists were like, you know what? Human noses, it doesn't really quite work that way. It's not magic. There are pheromones, they do have an effect, but not this kind of an effect where like a bunch of dudes get all sweaty and start trying to murder each other.
In the 24th century, like Dr. Crusher could have whipped up some kind of anti-pheromone
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Which I guess, it wasn't clear what Phlox
Serum.
did, whether it was an anti-pheromone thing, because I guess they didn't, because they had to get rid of the women, the Orion
Yeah,
women.
I think
so
they just got rid of them.
they got rid of them, and Phlox probably gave them some like painkillers or allergy pills or something.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the sweat, now I was thinking so the scene where Harad Sar is like where they're all eating and drinking and being merry or whatever. Well,
Are you talking about prior to when the Orion women came out?
just before the women came out.
Did they do their weird choreographed dance?
Yeah, it was.
They used like a choreographer that worked on videos, various MTV videos,
The choreography was good.
like Britney Spears and other
Yeah.
folks like that.
I didn't know that.
You can tell they made a thing about it because they took so much time with that scene. Like,
Yeah, they did. It got a little weird.
And the
It's
like, what are they
blocking-
doing here?
The blocking,
Yeah.
the blocking of the camera was very like deliberate.
Yeah.
and Tucker and
Charles
not
Tucker the
Tucker.
third.
It was Malcolm. It was Malcolm.
Malcolm Reed,
Malcolm and Archer were, they knew they were slaves. Or
Jonathan Archer.
At the time, they were under the impression that they were slaves, and yet you could tell they were super enjoying it. But I guess it's just the pheromones, whatever. But
Well, Reed was doing that whole like kind of junior officer, like ooh.
Yeah.
And Archer was doing that senior officer.
We'll accept these beans as payment, or
experiencing
as a gift, even
different
though
cultures.
we don't agree with slavery.
so as
Rude of us not to indulge
hard.
in the culture.
So as hard Sar was pouring that Gorn drink, that because the Gorns are really good at making
Mirador.
really good at making sugary sweet
The less
drinks.
said about the Gorn, the better.
the finest Mirador
But
in the
he
five
was-
systems.
He was pouring the drink on them, and at one point he drips a drop of liquid from his face, and it's easy to miss because it's on the.
Is it on that thing that's coming out of his face?
Yeah, it's on the. Oh, maybe it's off camera because it's on the other. It's on the other side of his face. You don't see it. That's a good
He's
point.
got that thing coming out of his face.
I didn't think about that. Maybe
like
it's
a
that thing from
spout.
his face. So
drainage.
the piercing thing.
Yeah.
maybe he was sweating from the Maybe he needed a special drainer because he was so sweating so much from
so much sweat
from those hot babes.
It's like okay, we saw what it did to the. We understand what it does to the human man, but what does it do to the fucking Orion man? They gotta have some shit on their face.
And then he's all sly. Goes, creatures such as these come with troubles of their own, which is. I don't know. I don't want to make a judgment.
Then he says women are the universe all over are the same.
Yeah, he goes, women are the same throughout the galaxy, aren't they? It's like, well,
just one
I don't know what that
big monolithic thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, come on, Star Trek.
And
get with the program.
And saying creatures such as these. Now, I don't want to make a judgment on what was okay to say too much. Maybe that was just kind of like more acceptable to say that about people back in there, but it's still
he's meant to be an antagonist. I mean, from the beginning, he's meant to be a sleazy guy, so I'll give him that.
Yeah, but I don't know.
That guy played a Bajoran, right, on Deep Space Nine.
I feel like I've seen him.
Did he?
He did some. Yeah, he did, and the lead Orion was Gul Dukat's daughter.
Was that Navarre who was the lead Orion?
I believe so. Yeah.
Interesting. Navarre.
Yeah.
If you've watched Discovery season 3,
Navarre Burton.
you'll know about
Can't say
Navarre.
Well, I'm gonna see how many times I can make that joke.
It was Herod Sar was William Lucking. According
William
to this.
Lucking, yeah.
He's known for Red Dragon
And a bunch of
and
other
some other
Yeah,
stuff.
he's been in some stuff. Yeah.
I don't know what TV stuff he's been known. Star Trek Enterprise as Herod Sar. I don't know. I don't see. But I mean, I guess it
I was reading that he was in Deep Space Nine.
I will choose to believe you on that one. He was on an episode of Silk Stockings. You remember that show on USA?
I do.
That was like
remember Silk
softcore
Stockings.
porn with no actual naked people.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
like a butt crack. That was pretty hot.
He was an A-Team.
Dun, dun, dun.
Partridge Family.
dun,
Simon
dun.
Simon.
Dun, 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 dun.
Rockford Files. Incredible Hulk.
We're reading IMDb. Roki
I'm reading
Crickinson
Wikipedia.
on the X-Files.
Reading various internet databases.
I'm
So
not even.
you
not
don't
even as
have
cool
to.
as Jim.
Yeah.
You don't have to.
Here it is, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Ties of Blood and Water, The Darkness and the Light, and Shakar.
Oh, he was in The Darkness and the Light. Did he play the creepy guy in The Darkness and the Light?
Furel. F-U-R-E-L.
Yeah, I think that was the guy who kidnaps Kira. And like The Darkness and the Light is some fucked up. There's some. I mean, you don't need to say it twice. There's a few fucked up episodes of Deep Space Nine, and that's one of them.
Guess who we played? You'll never guess, but guess who we played on the TV show Night Stalker on an episode of Night Stalker?
Kolchak's nephew.
Did you watch that show, or did you just make that up?
No, but I know that Kolchak was the Night Stalker.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, I thought that
Kolchak was the
show.
Night Stalker.
I mean, I never saw that show, but I know that's
The Night Stalker.
I never
back
even
in the
remember
day.
it.
Yeah.
His name was Gorn.
No!
G-O-R-N, Gorn.
Look at
and
that.
he was serving Gorn drink.
You know what that is called? That's called Kismet.
That's called nothing at all.
That is called Kismet.
It's called
Why-
the internet.
Why didn't Archer eat any of the weird food they were giving him?
Because he's a fucking piece of shit. Maybe
should've-
he was getting all horny. And some people get hungry when they're horny.
There's some
and
kind
people
of
get
Orion
unhungry.
pig or something.
Yeah. Did you know?
The food did look good.
You know that Kelby guy was being a dick even before
Fuck
the
that
Orions.
Kelby guy. Fuck Kelby.
But
Yeah,
you know,
Kelby sucks.
Yeah,
dude.
but you know what? You know what though? He was right in the end. Like, he was like, he's gunning for my job. He seemed like this paranoid, delusional asshole.
Oh, right. He was totally coming back.
He's
Yeah.
like, he's gonna gun for. He's gonna my job. I'm not gonna get that promotion. Tucker's like, he's just worried he's not gonna get his promotion.
He totally didn't get his promotion because Tucker came back.
It's like 3 days earlier, Tucker. Like, he's like, actually, to Paul, I got my promotion.
You're right. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
So for those who are just who just watched this episode and either haven't watched or are not familiar with the arc of season 4, this is not spoilery, so it's not really going to give anything away. But just to provide some context, in the preceding episodes, Trip. So basically, what's happened is Enterprise is the first Starfleet like Warp 5 vessel, right? But the whole
Finally, the
series,
Vulcans gave him Warp 5.
I know, right? Fucking Vulcans.
There's no Federation.
Through the whole series, they're kind of in the background. They're talking about how they're building a new ship, and it's going to be Columbia, right? And then early on in the prior to this story, Columbia has been launched. It has a captain who's friends with Archer, and there's some like really good interplay between Archer and that captain. There's some good stories. Yeah, Captain Hernandez. And Captain Hernandez wants Trip to be her engineer on the Columbia because, of course, he's so familiar with the Warp 5 engines, and it just, sort of makes sense in a lot of ways. And Trip is dealing with some issues related to T'Pol, which are making him sort of, uncomfortable on Enterprise, so he decides to go ahead and take up her offer. And so
It's like a classic scenario.
yeah,
of a TV
so
show.
prior to this episode, Trip had already agreed to go ahead and transfer to the Columbia, but then there are a series of events, which I won't give away, that result in basically the Enterprise needing some real quick help, and Tucker is really the most appropriate person to go and help fix the engines up after this series of events. So he's doing that, and that's where we're starting basically here, is that Tucker is just Charles Trip Tucker III is just temporarily on the Enterprise to help out, and then he's supposed to go back to Columbia, and that's why Kelby is feeling all threatened. Now, you're right, Dan.
It was presented as if he was a paranoid doofus.
And this is, I think that they made an error. They made an error in the full arc, because it's not just this episode, although this is where it's most acute. But they made an error, I think, with the Kelby arc, in that Kelby just comes off as like a weaselly, obnoxious dude, and like even if
I can't just do anything right.
even if his paranoia proves to be correct, it's kind of like, well, you didn't deserve the job if you're going to be all like,
yeah, right, yeah.
So
he was a whiny asshole before the Orions.
So and I think they did it because they wanted to make a smooth transition for why Trip is coming back, but it's dramatically more interesting if you are sympathetic with and like the new guy, so that when Trip comes back, it's not this like, well, fuck yeah, of course Trip is coming back. Thank fucking God Trip is coming back. It would be more dramatic to have to, as the audience member, process the fact, you're like, oh, but this guy really deserves it. He's been doing a good job. He's had a few moments where he helped save the ship, and it does kind of suck that now Trip is coming back. They chose not to go that direction. They chose to make this guy like just fucking obnoxious.
Yeah, they just for the sake of like conflict within the episode, that sort of put the sort of his Enterprise, I think, has a habit sometimes of forgetting and actively not caring about the emotional needs of tertiary characters. Because the same thing happened with Tucker's clone. Which there's an episode where Tucker needs to.
We'll cover that episode eventually because it's a good episode, but it's an upsetting episode.
Yeah, so
it's kind of like a Tuvix situation.
Yeah, right. And so
by the way, a good name for a band is the Tuvix situation.
Tuvix Sitch.
Mark that down. We've got dibs on that.
Mark it down, but we got dibs.
We got dibs.
We got dibs, asshole.
It's got.
I like you didn't say assholes. You said asshole because you're thinking of a particular member of the audience.
Yeah.
You're like you know who you are.
We had dibs in the first place.
We all know who we're talking about.
So they had to set up this conflict between Tucker and this Kelby guy just to
Charles Trip Tucker III.
That guy, so they could make this conflict. But yeah, they totally ignored the fact that the result of that is that he was totally in the right to be paranoid, and Tucker
This is a good point.
And Tucker sneakily went behind his back.
The 3-day thing is exactly right, because it's meant to be cute at the end of the episode.
Yeah, that's the thing.
But retroactively, you're like, what a piece of shit.
Yeah, because like he's walking around talking about, oh, he thinks he's gonna take my job. Oh, he thinks I'm gonna take his job. Oh, he's worried about his promotion. And it's like, yeah, and you know he should be worried about his promotion because you accepted the shit 3 days ago.
And you're not doing anything. You're not like, maybe you should go to Columbia. You can be the chief engineer over there.
Yeah, you're not doing anything to like. You're just making it seem like he's an asshole.
Meanwhile, Captain Hernandez is like, Kelby, fuck that guy. He doesn't get to be. I don't want him on my fucking ship.
The deal was Tucker, not Kelby.
Yeah, he was such a snot though. Like, why is he being whiny to his superior officer like that? You know.
I did
the pheromone.
I did.
That was before the Orions, though. That like before the
before the Orions, he was being weaselly, and they set that up. I mean, in within the context, within the enclosure of the show, it's good writing, it's good dramatic setup. They're setting up a pre-existing conflict that is then exacerbated by the arrival of the Orions, and that way, from a dramatic and narrative standpoint, it flows nicely. It makes sense. You understand what's going on. It's not coming out of nowhere. But there are other things that come out of nowhere, like Captain Archer being like, let's go ahead and just fucking murder these people, this underpowered ship. And everyone's like, dude, no, we're not. We don't want to do that.
I liked it in that scene when he was like, keep scanning. And it was all like, keep scanning. And it reminded me in the part in the Lower Decks show when they're like, we're being scanned. They're scanning us.
They're aggressively scanning
us. Like, no, they're not scanning. No, we're getting scanned again.
This guy thinks he's going to lose his promotion. he's crazy. He thinks I'm gonna take his job.
He did have one of the best.
I do know. He was gaslighting him. That's kind of like gaslighting, right?
In a way, I mean, he was being deceitful.
He was being deceitful. He knew he was going to take his job, and he made the guy seem like an asshole anyways about it. Even though he was being an asshole,
he was an asshole in the first place.
He was an asshole in the first place, but he made him seem paranoid too when that was like on point. Anyways, yeah.
I will give credit to Kelby for having one of the best exchanges of the episode. And the episode, part of I think what causes some friction with this episode is it from a story structure sense, there are some flaws here and there, but it is a pretty well written episode. The effects are good. The directing style, both the space shots and the shots on the Orion ship, when they're, there's a lushness to it. The production values are high. But then it contrasts with some of this ridiculousness of this situation and the sort of the disconnect between the vibe that you're getting that this is a feminist story when it is in fact sort of the opposite of a feminist story in a lot of ways. But I do have to give credit for this ridiculous but entertaining exchange between Kelby and the Orion girl when Kelby says, "The injectors feed into the dilithium chamber." And then she responds, "That's where the matter and antimatter mix."
Yeah.
And he says, "That's right." And then they fuck.
Yeah. They do.
Because that doesn't happen too much.
But when
you talk about antimatter, matter.
She could feel the power in the warp core.
I bet. I don't know that he fucked each time, but I think Scotty came each time that he talked about the engines.
Scotty?
Montgomery Scott, the chief engineer of the original Enterprise.
Yeah, I know, which is why I'm wondering how you...
I'm just saying that in terms of, I can imagine Captain, or at that time, Lieutenant Scott or Commander Scott, deriving sexual pleasure from talking about the engines.
Yeah.
I was just saying, that's the closest thing I could get to another example of somebody getting fucking horny talking about the dilithium chamber.
Yeah.
But what I liked about this was it's ridiculous, it's stupid, but it was well delivered. The actors are good, and it's such a weirdly Star Trek thing to be these terms being bandied about in association with sexual congress.
Yeah.
It's that's what you get when you come to Star Trek. You're not going to get that in the same way in other series.
I'm fully functional.
I think her name is Dinesh. That's the only name I was able to catch from the three of them.
Yeah, one of them is.
Oh, I think they gave the name for Archer, the one that Archer had sex with.
Yeah,
that was Navarre.
That's Navarre. The other one that was with Kelby was Dinesh.
Yeah, that was Dinesh, and then I don't know what the other one didn't do much.
The third woman was
Maras.
The actress's name was Crystal something.
Crystal.
That was Dinesh, Crystal Allen.
That scene with the Archer was kind of weird too, because first of all them smooch sounds were a little excessive. I was like, this is starting to gross me out. Not like I'm like gross smooches, but it's just like.
For the younger folks out there, the mid 2000s were, for a variety of reasons, it's too complicated to go into now, were a bizarre and upsetting time.
Rife with weird.
A bizarre and upsetting time. We can't tell you what age Dan was at the time.
No.
To provide additional context, because
I already told you so you could llisten earlier.
You might dox him and take all his...
you already know I'm cis.
Take all his magic cards.
Yeah. Oh no, another fact.
One by one. Somebody's just gotta... They're listening to each episode. They're like, I'm gonna get this motherfucker. I'm so close to getting this motherfucker.
It was weird. And for some reason, it was always the most with Archer, because he seemed the most bona fide.
Which was weird, because
like,
usually the captain is the least.
Yeah, right. And
Reed was the hero in this case.
Yeah.
When he was with the Orion, and then T'Pol called him to the bridge, and he was like, "Okay, wait a minute, did he have sex with the Orion?"
Yeah, totally did. And beforehand,
and he was all weird afterwards. He was like, ugh.
"Yeah." When he
it's like, fuck it, let's kill him.
Do you think Porthos was watching? I didn't.
Porthos in this episode.
Yeah, I didn't see Porthos in this episode.
He must have been somewhere. But when he was talking to Paul, he was all like, "Yeah, Archer here. Okay, I'll be in there in a minute." And it's just, it was really making me, the whole thing was making me feel uncomfortable. And then, she was horning him up on the bridge near the end, and he was all like, she's like, "Go get to Paul, get her out of here," or whatever it is he said. And then, that was interesting because, so there was that whole scene where that little ship came along and attacked him. And I guess the whole point of that scene was simply just to show the state of Archer's mind, because that ship was attacking him, right? and then Archer was just like basically like, no, we're gonna kill this ship. And so I can't think of any purpose to that scene other than just to sort of show that Archer was like kind of like in that state. That was the whole point of that scene.
Yeah.
But then Malcolm strangely was like, no. And I don't know if Malcolm told him not to shoot the ship because he felt bad for it, or if Malcolm simply wanted to be like, no, another alpha male, I'm going to disagree with you, and that'll get the ladies.
That's a good question. The way they played it was that Malcolm was still somewhat under control. Which,
well, I mean, Tucker wasn't affected at all.
Faces,
so, and the reason why I say Malcolm is the hero,
He was making some funny faces.
Yeah.
obviously Tucker is ultimately the quote unquote hero, but Tucker also was not affected by the pheromones. So what I
He
mean,
wasn't affected by the pheromones because him and T'Pol are in love.
exactly. So the within the context of the people who were affected by the pheromones, Reed seemed to be doing a lot better, not only than Archer, but than you'd expect, because Reed has a history on this show of being the kind of nerdly horny guy where he's horny and like, ooh, look at the ladies, look at it. And sometimes they pair him and Mayweather up in that role because Mayweather's, they're both kind of, young and, whatever. Young and dumb. And
So is it implied that is it implied the fact that Archer had sex with I forget what was her name?
Navarre.
Is it implied that made him even more under her spell from the sex? Because like
I don't know.
All they talked about was pheromones, so I don't see how.
Subtext, yeah.
Yeah, because like
Maybe if
maybe
you have sex with somebody, maybe you get more pheromones squished up
Maybe he
inside
was just
you.
super drained afterwards, so he was all just like, yeah.
Well, I mean, like Malcolm, like maybe if he had sex with one of them, he would become crazier. But yeah, for whatever
No,
reason.
that's a good point.
But I don't know. I wasn't really sure what direction.
So do you think Malcolm was rejected even by the Orion women?
Maybe it was in a cut scene. Maybe
It was just funny because Malcolm was a sexy guy, and we've talked about in previous episodes. We talked about like why don't we don't see him with his shirt off very often. It's always Archer, Tripp, and Mayweather.
He's usually the one that wants to blast people.
Yeah, he likes to blast people, and he likes to go to seedy clubs and look at butterfly tongue ladies.
Oh yeah, he likes to have fun at the strip club and stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, there was when the Navarre. She goes to when she was like about to start smooching Archer. She goes, "If I were to do this, would it violate ship's protocol?" And Archer goes, "Not necessarily."
Not necessarily.
Yep, he does that, and that's all I could think about. That's all I can think about is
Good old
Phlox.
Phlox.
Good Phlox.
They don't have any rules about the Orions yet, so it wasn't in the book.
They have to make a specific rule about each
It's
species
like,
of when you're allowed to have sex.
You're
with
not
them.
allowed to have Orions just wandering the ship.
No sex with Orions or Deltans.
They're not allowed in the bridge. They're not
Beware
allowed in engineering.
Betazoids.
So and
Go
then
crazy with Cardassians.
T'Pol said pretty early on was like, we got to put some clothes on these people, and like that just
Yeah.
never happened.
Most of this episode,
He was like, or lack of it.
Yeah, right.
most of this episode is T'Pol just putting up with some fucking bullshit.
Who's the
She looks at
captain?
her. It's so
the constantly irritated.
like when she asked Tucker about the daydreaming stuff, and he's like, "No, I don't," and she's just
and
like,
he
"Never
paused.
mind."
He all paused for so fucking long.
It's like she knows he had the daydreams. Come on.
And like when he straight up goes like, "We didn't mate" or whatever. Like when she's talking about when we mated, he's like, "We didn't mate." She just gave this
She
like,
just looked at him and was like, "You stuck your dick in me."
yeah, it's like, how do you want to talk? What word do you want to use? She was having none of it. Although this was like a TOS episode in that they pulled the whole joke on the Vulcan thing, like
Yes.
Vulcan said the joke thing. Except see, T'Pol looked irritated by it, but Spock always rolled with it.
Well, he's half human. Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
He is half human.
So
and
ironically,
He already has a sense of humor.
ironically, the full Vulcan gets more irritated and emotional about it.
Yeah.
because Vulcans aren't.
And I do agree that there is a lot of fourth season episodes in particular have more of a TOS feel. And if you look at the articles written at the time, people would say that was sort of why Manny Coto was brought in. He was a Star Trek fan and an established television writer. So they gave him control of the series for the fourth season to try to move it in the direction that it was kind of initially expected to go in. And with Enterprise, similar to discussions we and others have had in the past about Voyager, Enterprise was advertised as sort of a certain thing, as was Voyager, and then sort of quickly diverges somewhat from it. Enterprise, I think, less so than Voyager. Enterprise is still a prequel. They're still exploring new worlds. And frankly, I think there's a heck of a lot to enjoy in those first 3 seasons. They're really good. But it wasn't quite that vibe that you were expecting of, crazy adventures, totally mind-blowing, meeting Klingons for the first time and all this other stuff. And in the 4th season, they kind of went hard at that for that style of storytelling. And there are plenty of episodes of TOS where, they all get old or they all get drunk or they all, there is that thing where somebody has to help them out because they're under the influence of something.
Do you think that was just sort of a product of the time it was because TV shows didn't get that kind of funding back then? And now TV shows get like infinite funding, it seems. I know they don't, but like TV now is just like movies, basically. And so I don't know that they couldn't go, because like you said, it had the widescreen, so it had this more cinematic look to it, but maybe they couldn't afford to put enough money into, not to say you need money to make a great movie. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying some nice production kind of stuff maybe they were going for. That's a little like Babylon 5. I never got into that show. I was just too put off by the CGI, and that makes me an asshole because I understand that it was like people are like it's a really good show, but like that CGI just took me out of it. Maybe if I tried again I'd like it, but as a kid for whatever reason
I didn't like all the weird looking people.
Did you ever see that Farscape show?
Yeah, Farscape show's even weirder.
It was fucked up, dude. I didn't watch it.
But
I watched like one episode.
No doubt it's great, but evidence of your and our biases are that you're watching Babylon 5 and you're like, I just can't handle the CGI, and meanwhile we're like, Star Trek mirror is great. Those fucking cardboard walls and hot glue buttons that are all like lumpy.
Yeah, I don't know, and and I can't tell you that I'm biased or not biased. I can't tell you. All I can say is just when I saw those ships, and not that the ships even really looked great in this episode. They look kind of like colorful and bouncy and weird.
But there was
something about the CGI in Babylon 5. It's like they tried to do so much with it that it was just like weird. It's like that's weird.
Star Trek benefits
things.
from having that. It has a style. It has an established style that they can then evolve from, and everyone's going to have their quibbles about which directions were good, good evolution and bad evolution or whatever. But the fact is that they have something to build on. And in Enterprise, you see them starting to do a lot more cinematic sort of space shots. Not so much they do their little space battles and stuff. Frankly, I think a lot of the Enterprise space battles are much less impressive than the Deep Space Nine space battles.
Yeah, I agree.
Which is sort of the epitome of like the silver age of Star Trek, that 87 to 2005. But what Enterprise did really well is they do some really interesting shots where it's like facing down on the planet, and then the Enterprise comes all like hoving into view across the thing, or it's small or big or whatever. They started experimenting with
They actually did that in this episode. Right after Dinesh and Kelby disappear to go do it, near the last half of the episode, there's a shot where they have an overhead shot of Enterprise with the planet as the background, taking up the entire background. And my only complaint about that scene is they cut it too soon, because I was like waiting for it to show the whole ship, and the split second it showed the whole ship, it cut it, and I wanted it like a couple seconds longer.
On this is where I think they've done very well on specifically on Discovery. But also a little bit on Lower Decks, where Picard didn't have as many opportunities, but Discovery, some of the space shots are just gorgeous. And they also often will let it play out longer. They need to do more of that, because I think Discovery also suffers a little bit from the modern, quick cutting. Mm-hmm. They've been getting better at that. They've been reining that in a little bit.
You were saying you wanted Picard to have like some longer.
No. I'm saying that what they started in Enterprise, despite the long hiatus between Enterprise and Discovery, what they started then in terms of kind of moving towards more cinematic portrayals of the ships, in Discovery they kind of take that full bore, and the editing is starting to be a little bit more cinematic and interesting. My main complaint with early Discovery is it was a little bit jump cutty, and I think they've gotten a little bit better about that.
I thought that was one of your minor quibbles with Picard, though, is that like some of the establishing shots of like on the vineyard and stuff, like you wanted it to sort of like settle a little longer.
That's a fair, that's true. And in Picard, it was inconsistent. Sometimes they would have like these nice long shots, and then other times you're like, okay, I guess they just decided the episode had to fit fit within a certain time frame. The
Yeah,
Picard one that you're referencing is right at the beginning of the pilot of Picard, where he's going through the vineyard, and they really needed that scene to be about 15 to 20 seconds longer, with much longer segments in between it, because the point of that scene was to establish that Picard is living this slow, rural life, and he's retired and he's relaxed and he's bored, and you don't get that when it's all like spliced together in 5 minutes, him walking across an entire fucking estate.
You noticed that those Orion people.
Yes, that's
You
what
know
we've been
those-
talking about this
Those
entire
green
time.
people.
Yeah, yeah, they're green.
You heard of these Orion people?
They each
You heard
got
about them? You heard about this?
They each got their own giant room. And the only reason I think about this now is because, I mean, that was common back then for everyone to have a giant room.
Yeah.
But then I think about Discovery, right? And Discovery, the rooms are all small. But if you look at the bridge, like Discovery's bridge is at least 4 times bigger than
Oh, yeah.
Enterprise's bridge.
It's
The Enterprise
massive.
bridge looks tiny, actually.
The room that Michael Burnham and Tilly had looked really big, though. It had like a big old ceiling.
It's tall.
But
It's tall.
it was
Maybe
it
it was like one
but
of those 18th century rooms.
But they still
Tall ceiling.
shared it, and each of the Orion people
filled up with drool.
Each one of those.
Well, no, you're right, because they were.
What?
Well, there was that scene where Tilly's like drooling, and there's
When
like
she's
this big
sleeping.
glob
Oh yeah,
of drool.
yeah. Well, the Orion,
I'm fixated on it.
yeah, I know what you're talking about. The Orion guest rooms were, though, like they each had their own, and they were probably bigger than.
They were bigger. Archer's room is not that big,
Yeah.
because like on Enterprise, the rooms are noticeably smaller than in, say, TNG. Right?
It's all submarine and shit.
So,
Yeah.
so for some reason, they got these giant rooms.
The staterooms or whatever.
These giant rooms. At the beginning, like
These TNG rooms are all nice and like a really nice hotel.
yeah, everything did seem like really.
If you got one of the good rooms with the slanted windows.
Oh yeah.
Hopefully, it was making that whoom noise.
And then the Discovery had like that, like sort of sterile white data room in one of those episodes on the Enterprise, or on Discovery.
Affirmative.
On Discovery, they had this like white future sort of sterile room, but then the TNG didn't have any rooms like that. They just had these sort of, all the rooms kind of had this carpet, and
Although we didn't see everything on as we've discussed in the past, when you look at the technical manual, they had, for example, the cetacean
right,
navigation
there's been a
room.
bunch of stuff we didn't see.
And we
Right.
didn't see astrometrics was referenced a lot, but we didn't see that until Generations.
Maybe Discovery had to have smaller rooms so they could fit all those giant conduits for the turbo lift.
I was thinking exactly that. like with Discovery, just like
So she could afford to-
huge.
There was
amounts
a lot of
room.
So she
space
could-
in there.
Yeah, it's because Discovery, they said they had 7 decks, and that actually got, not Discovery, Enterprise had 7 decks. And that got me thinking about the scene where, that scene in Discovery where they're falling, like, through a giant, like, basically giant turbo lift to
like Wonka Vader action.
yeah, and they're falling for, like, 10 seconds. And so they fell farther than 7 decks, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So, like,
there was a lot of space.
yeah,
in
it was
there.
weird. I mean, I guess, yeah, there was. So, I was going to say at the beginning of the episode, so that ship approached and they were basically being like, turn your weapons off. We're not going to turn ours off. And then like Archer goes, well, we're not going to turn our weapons off. And the guy's like, well, if you don't turn your weapons off, we're going to fuck you up. And then Archer's like, how about we do it together? And then he's like, okay, sure, whatevs. Like, what was that about?
It's called diplomacy, Dan.
But I mean, it's, yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna fucking blast you if you don't turn yours off. You turn yours off. I'm not gonna turn mine if you don't. Well, I'm gonna blast you. Let's do it together.
Okay.
I think it's a fair
I
observation.
guess it is. I guess it's diplomacy. Summarized.
It's a fair observation, because you'd expect, given what happens immediately afterwards, right there, it's a bit of a false tease. Like, yes, this guy's an antagonist, right? But why didn't he just come and say, like, look, I've got a business proposition, and then Archer's like, we don't believe you, and then they could have a little bit of conflict that way, and then the guy was like, well, like, either listen to my business proposition or I'm going to fucking blow you out of the sky. That would be just as it would have come to the exact same area, but it would make more sense than what happens here, which is like, we're gonna fuck each other up, and then in the next scene it's like, we're gonna go to dinner with this guy. And then he presents the business proposition.
That ship was a little bit smaller than the Enterprise, and it looked like a booger.
But apparently it was
Orion
it was
booger,
green.
booger class.
armed to the teeth.
And do you think it's like, like the Orion ships, they don't need to be green just because the Orions are green.
Yeah, I know.
It's not like Starfleet ships are like, either white or black or whatever,
Yeah.
Like, Klingon ships are brown.
Yeah. That Herod battle at the end where they were just fucking them up. The Herod ship was. I keep thinking of it's Herod, but I keep thinking of Herod from the Bible.
Yeah, King Herod.
King Herod,
yeah.
who was like
Herod the Great.
who was all into being horny and stuff.
And
So I
then
wonder if there was some kind of relation to that. I don't know.
Are you thinking of Jesus Christ Superstar?
Well, I mean, I'm also thinking about Herod was known as kind of like he was known as kind of this sort of
He was a troublesome dude.
yeah.
If you'd like to learn more, you should tune into our Biblical Scholar podcast.
Well,
It's called It's Got the Bible.
He was just
and
known
every
as,
Sunday, Dan will read a passage from the Bible and provide a textual analysis of the intentions of
not
Jesus.
a sermon, just a suggestion.
Those were I think those were local commercials,
Yeah.
Dan.
Okay.
Yeah.
McLean
For
Bible
for the
Church.
McLean Bible Church.
Does that guy still do commercials?
I'm sure.
I
don't
think
know.
he's got to be in jail or something.
You think by now?
There's something shady about that business.
I'm just saying Herod was supposed to be kind of eccentric in his own way, but
Most definitely.
Didn't he smash babies on rocks or something?
Supposedly, yeah.
Is that I guess that's a form of eccentricity.
So during that battle where the Herod ship was fucking up this Enterprise, I'm really having trouble remembering Discovery and Enterprise. So they were like diverting some power from the grav plating. This is a weird thing because it's just like, well, we're going to take it away from the grav plating. We're not going to see any results of this, but I'm going to say a line. We're going to be a bit lighter on our feet. And then he's like, what the hell? I've been meaning to lose a few pounds. That was such a dumb line. That's a dumb line.
I mean,
Why would they bother to put that in there? To be humorous, to give it a beat, I understand, but it's like
I can't complain about it.
I mean,
You are free to complain about it. It's
is
Star
dumb.
Trek.
No, I know.
It's Star Trek. They're gonna have some goofy ass jokes.
yeah, and you know what? I'm not going to crucify him for it. Speaking of Jesus, but I will say that
It's
that
got
one.
the Bible.
And I like their cheesiness, and I like their sort of like, but like this one didn't do it for me. It just,
I mean, normally Contratrinier can deliver those lines a little bit better than he does because a lot of his, he's got that goofy humor that's part of his personality. But when you watch all 4 seasons of Enterprise, it generally hits. And the joke is that he makes silly jokes.
Yeah.
But it doesn't always hit. And I think it's a fair point you could say. And this was a bit weak sauce in this particular episode.
I love him.
I thought it was kind of silly how the opening part of this before the credits, the cold open, it was all short, and it was like it just sort of ended with like the Orion guy was being all threatening, and it was just like all like burn.
Yeah.
But it was like it was like a minute of open, and it wasn't like.
We've gotten spoiled.
We're so spoiled by the every other show since Enterprise.
Well, Discovery had like
especially.
14, 15-minute cold opens sometimes.
Yeah.
I was actually noticing that because this, because the theme song, this is the one where it adds the beat where it's like, it's like,
Oh yeah, right. Was that for this season?
it's been a long road.
It's got a similar backbeat to the Crocodile Dundee theme.
I watched it on CBS All Access, but then after my repeated watchings, I had to watch on Netflix so I could skip the opening.
So I noticed that I was trying to figure out what was the first, because I had forgotten what the first episode that they used that on. It turns out it was season 3, episode 1 is when they added that off.
Season 3,
They-
episode 1.
I was reading-
the Zindi, if I recall correctly.
I was reading some people saying that it sucked when they added that, but I thought it really rocked it. I thought
It makes
really
it
rocked
sound
up.
better,
Yeah,
actually.
It does.
They did the same. They did the same thing with Deep Space Nine. Was it season 4? I think when they changed. They had the upgraded station and they added more ships and then they added a little bit of a.
But this added a little guitar lick at the end that goes.
Yeah. I still wish they used the end credit theme. The end credit theme, the entire series. It's more traditional.
Yeah.
I'm not an anti Faith of the Heart person anymore. I used to be, but and we've had many.
I am.
Yeah, well,
Big time.
See, here's the thing. You're early in your Enterprise career.
That's right.
Because what happens is there's a life, and I've discussed this on Twitter through the It's Got Star Trek at It's Got Star Trek on twitter.com. We've had a lot of discussions with folks about this, how there's sort of a life cycle to the Faith of the Heart. And we've probably mentioned it on previous discussions as well. But it's where at first you hate it. It's terrible. It's horrible. And it's grating and awful. And in time, it's not even that you get used to it. You do get used to it at a certain point, but with Netflix and stuff, you can skip the intro as Jesse was mentioning and stuff. But then there comes a time when you find wait a second, I'm not skipping the intro anymore.
Oh no.
I'm listening to this whole
rock
thing. I'm sort of wiggling my butt a
you
little.
get used to sitting on a nail.
I'm shaking my hips. You know what? In fact, no one's gonna fucking bend or break me. goddammit. No one's gonna fucking bend or break me.
What did they rhyme time with time or something? I can't remember.
Oh, I don't even listen.
But
Yeah, see, he's not ready yet. He's not there yet.
The whole reason I brought that up, though.
after like getting from there to here, then I stop. That's it.
Oh, they ran here with here. They go getting from there to here, and our time is almost here or something.
No, our time is almost near, isn't it?
Is it? Maybe you're right. Because I remember being pissed off at one of the lines because I was like, they could have used a different word. But maybe I'm wrong this whole time. Look, the whole point of why I brought that up, though, was because Jesse was talking about how there was no time between the cold open and the intro, right? My whole point was when I was going to look through the different episodes to see where exactly it started with the new style, I noticed that it's not just that episode; it's all the episodes.
Okay.
And there was a lot of like last episode of Enterprise because there was a lot of these like 3 to 5 parters. But yeah, and maybe that was part of it too. Maybe all these 3 to 5 parters helped contribute. I don't fucking know. But like they were all less than a minute before the cold open.
Wow.
Now, I like the idea of when shows at the end have a different song in the closing credits than they do at the open. There was one when Married with Children. You know, they had the whole that song. Is that Sinatra or something?
Yeah.
It's like love and marriage,
Yeah.
and at the end credits, they just play this tune that had like violins, and it was just going like do 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 do.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Do 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 do. And it's like, what does that have to do with anything? But yeah,
I remember that was like more earlier.
yeah, so a lot of shows did that where they had like the end theme and it seemingly had no relation to the opening theme, but I kept looking for one because I was like,
It's sort of more old school television. I
think it is. I think it's old school. All right, I'm going to have to look up the lyrics then because I thought Faith of the Heart.
Well, while you're looking up the lyrics, I was going to comment on the music in this episode in particular because I thought Jay Chataway was doing all the music for Star Trek at this point, and this episode had this weird combination where some of the sort of musical themes, particularly around the Orions dancing and stuff, were this weirdly almost contemporary to now aggressive, grungy electronica, something that you might hear in The Expanse. And then other times it was the, 1980s style TNG tinkly twinklies. So it worked. I think it worked in the episode, but it was somewhat jarring to be all like they're dancing. It's like, and there was like, ting, 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 ting. I'm a TNG tinkly winkly.
I'm embarrassed because all this time I've been pissed off that they said it's been a long road getting from there to here. It's been a long time, but my time is finally here. Oh no, this is what pissed me off. Okay, it wasn't here and near. Okay, because I knew that here and near, that of course made more sense, but in my mind I made up something where they said here and here and that pissed me off. No, what it was is it's been a long time, but my time is finally, they use the word time twice. It's not on the rhyme. They don't rhyme the word together, but it's like they use time and then they say time. It's been a long time. My time is finally near.
It's not on the rhyme, it's on the time.
But this is not even, this is not,
that's like they could have picked a different word because they're using this word too close. And
but now you're
weird.
Criticizing what's his name, the guy who wrote the song, because this song predates
Rod
Enterprise.
Stewart.
Well, no, it hasn't.
Rod Stewart sang the song, but I think it might have been written by somebody else.
I'm not saying it has anything to do with.
You're not?
Enterprise. No, I'm not. I'm just saying.
No, I'm not saying that you're not saying.
Then why
anything.
did you brought it? Why'd you bring it up?
Because I just, for our audience's sake, who may be confused.
Okay.
I want them to put the blame
I'm a little confused.
Put the blame on the problematic lyrics on the right place. So it's either Rod Stewart or the other guy.
Well, Russell Wilson. It's by song by Russell Wilson. I don't know who sings. Are you sure? It sounds like Rod Stewart, but is it?
Rod Stewart sings this song. I don't remember.
He had recorded the song.
Maybe he did it first
previously. Yeah.
This is all information that we
deal.
could find out in some fashion. But you know what?
Yeah,
Faith of the Heart by Rod Stewart.
It is by Rod Stewart.
So it says. Wait. So why does Faith? Okay. So why on Google does it say Faith of the Heart song by Rod Stewart, and then I look on Google and it says Where My Heart Will Take Me song by Russell Watson.
I know Russell Watson is the guy who sang it for this.
Yeah. Like there's something weird about how it has two different titles. I haven't quite figured that one out.
I saw Russell Watson singing this live in a concert which was really funny because like people in the crowd were like, "Play Faith of the Heart" or whatever they thought that. I think they called it Faith of the Heart.
Russell Watson.
So I mean,
YouTube search Russell Watson, Faith of the Heart live.
So yeah, why does it have two titles, and why does the song credited to Rod Stewart to Russell Watson? I guess he's saying it, but
He's
it's like,
the performer.
but it just says song by. It doesn't say performed by. It says song by. Maybe Google's
that's poor crediting.
I think that's Google's just doing its robot thing and fucking up.
Google doing its robot thing,
And it's a fucking up.
It's gonna do some shit.
It might not just be Google. That's just sometimes how things go.
Yeah, I hate this world.
I know, it's just the world. It's not Google.
So
the world is fucked up.
When did the reliance on dilithium start happening? Because they were worried about
Straight away.
Because, so they were talking about there was large amounts of magnesite, enough to build 1,000 warp reactors.
I think that's more of a structural.
That's a structural.
thing.
You need the special material that can handle the antimatter.
That's a real.
containment.
Magnetite's a real thing. Dilithium's a made up.
Well, I didn't say one was real or fake. I was just noticing
No,
that
I
they were
know.
different.
Hey, Jesse. Sidebar.
Fuck off, Patrick.
I think Dan might have said something.
Fuck. I'm just clarifying what I do and do not know.
No, so I think it's an important thing to point out though that normally we see, especially on TNG, but also on
See on
Enterprise a
TNG.
little
See on
bit,
TNG. See on TNG.
It's just because the letter C and T and G, are
And
all
G.
letters.
And
C
sounds like and.
C on TNG.
T and G.
Yes. English is a colorful and complex language.
Did TNG come on the CW? Or was
Well,
it on,
that fucked me up.
Was it on UPN?
No, TNG
no.
was syndicated. TNG and Deep
It was
Space Nine
syndicated,
were syndicated, so they were on every channel that whichever channel bought them in a local market.
True.
Voyager was on UPN,
UPN. that's
United
what it
Paramount
was.
Network.
Oh, yeah.
One of them failed networks, depending on how you look at it.
Kingston-
They got bought up and WB and UPN merged, I think. To
Remember where there's
form
the
CW.
there's the amusement park in Richmond, Virginia, King's Dominion.
King's Dominion.
It's in Doswell, Virginia.
They used to be.
well, it's near Richmond.
It is near. Yeah,
So
I'm
my
sorry.
They
bad.
were
My
owned by-
bad.
owned
For
by
all
Paramount for a
intents and
while.
purposes, it's Richmond.
They had Klingons walking.
They
around
were
and shit.
before Paramount. They were owned by Hanna-Barbera,
Yes.
Yeah.
which was weird.
That's
Or
why
at
they
least-
had that Yogi Bear.
Is it just a
Scooby-Doo
Six Flags?
shit.
I don't think
No.
they were owned by Hanna-Barbera, but I think they were owned by a company that had like the licensing from Hanna-Barbera, and then
Right,
so
something
put
like that.
Yeah, it was some big deal.
But they had the cave, and it
Smurfs.
turned. Yeah, they had some cave that was like the Yogi Bear cave, and it turned into the Klingon hideout or something. No, it didn't call it that, but they did have to rename.
They had Smurf Mountain, and they got rid of it.
Oh, did that turn into the volcano or something?
Yeah, I think so.
This
Klingons
is very
walking around.
interesting.
They never had Cardassians.
It's got
walking around.
King's
It was always
Yeah.
Klingons walking around.
because they're the coolest.
And I think Vulcans.
So nobody knows who a Cardassian is.
No, people of fucking culture know what a Cardassian
Yeah,
is.
I'm just saying they're.
I mean, if I'm going to fucking King's Dominion to see Star Trek shit.
yeah, if you are, of course.
No, but I mean, think about it. Think about it. We got a license. Oh, we're a company. We own the license to Star Trek. We're going to use Star Trek to attract Star Trek fans to our park.
There better be a
And we're just going to show them a bunch of fucking Klingons and
I'm
Vulcans.
not saying it's
better be
right.
an Andor and an Andorian.
Andorian would be good. But see, Star Trek was down on the
Tellarite.
Andorians in that time period.
I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that Cardassians were very limited mostly to DS9. Now, they made appearances elsewhere, but that was like a DS9 thing, and nobody liked DS9.
But now they do.
Now they do.
Who doesn't like DS9?
I don't know. People gave it a lot of shit.
Yeah, they did.
People are
But
all the Star Trek.
I agree. It's not cool. Klingons, everyone knows who a Klingon is. You know, it's like, but you go to your average sort of household and ask what a Cardassian is, it's going to be less people saying they know.
I kind of
what a
like those
Klingon-
Cardassians. They're kind of cool.
Yeah, they're like weird snake reptile people.
And they write those long ass books where the same thing happens over and over and over again.
That's
And Carrick is, and Bashir is all like, "This is boring." And Carrick's like, "No, repetition is one of the finest forms in
That's right.
Cardassian literature."
I keep expecting when they're naked to have like a super Cobra style torso. Like their torso would look like the neck and head of a cobra, where it'd have all those wings.
They have spoony
And then
genitals.
and they would have they'd have something with spoon. Well, I
No,
wasn't thinking
the
that
genitals.
wrong.
All
The genitals
spoony.
are like forks.
Oh, they're forks.
Oh no. But
Fork
I don't
you.
think naked Cardassians look as cool as I think they do in my head.
Rule 34 Cardassians. By the way, we've discussed this before.
Nobody
In fact,
knows.
I think one of the clips of you talking about seeing Cardassians naked shows up in our that we put together
Yeah.
a clip.
And I think I remember being
of our first year.
I think I remembered being disappointed by the naked Cardassians.
Yeah.
I wanted it to be more snake-like.
Well, you got to commission some art. We there's a lot of people in our audience I know who
I can't draw.
No, you can't, but you can commission the art. And I know we have people in our audience who are really good at drawing in general and drawing Star Trek characters.
I hope so.
And if you're very lucky, maybe somebody will email you a lewd picture of a naked Cardassian male.
Feedback.
Male, but it doesn't have to be lewd. It just has to be naked.
Okay, all right.
And
so you don't want any drama going on. You don't want any.
I just want their torso to look like a cobra neck head.
You want like you want a medical style illustration of a nude Cardassian.
Well, I mean, they could be doing like an action kick or something. I don't know, but like
like kicking a soccer ball and their penis sort of is flopping up a little bit.
Spoony penis is flopping around.
maybe they have like a triangle penis where they've got two at the base and it joins into one as it hangs down.
I don't understand what that means. What's a triangle penis?
It's
Do you
like
mean a Christmas tree penis?
It's like you got two, yeah, but it's a hole in the middle, so you can grab it and rip it if you needed to.
Whoa!
But they're reptiles, so they would grow back.
if you need to.
Do you think they're reptile based, the Cardassians?
Oh, most definitely.
I guess that would make sense. I don't know.
Oh man! This episode was directed by Alan Croker, and I think it's important to mention the direction of this episode because it really plays into both what's entertaining about the episode and also some of the sort of problems of it. Right. So first of all, Alan Croker, you might recognize that name because he has a lengthy Star Trek pedigree. He directed over 38 episodes during Star Trek's quote unquote silver period of Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and Enterprise. And he, in fact, directed the series finales, I think, for all three of those shows and a number of season finales. So he was one of the go-to directors that they used on all three of those shows. And this show, again, we talked earlier about it's kind of trying to do this feminist thing, but one of the things that undermines it is, we'll use a term that I'm sure many people have heard by now called the male gaze.
I knew it.
Right? The male gaze, which is when you're directing something, it happens in writing and other things too, but in television and in movies, the direction, the choice of where the camera is, the choice of how the camera moves, the choice of the lens that you're using, all of these things are come together to produce the vibe that the image on the screen gives you. And in this episode, it's about the most male gazy thing I've ever seen in Star Trek.
There's some really blatant scenes.
And the one that
There's
really
some green butts.
Is it when it's like on her butt going down to her calves when she's like walking down.
And not only that, that's a weirdly
Some T'Pol butt.
No, it's not a T'Pol butt.
Well, there is some T'Pol.
Well, there is.
There's T'Pol butts that have been talked about in other episodes.
Yeah, and but even in those episodes, the camera was usually locked down. It was a more Star Trek-y style feel. That one shot that you're referring to, Dan, I was also thinking of that because it's a handheld shot, which is unusual. It's not that they don't use handheld shots in Star Trek, but they usually, if they're using them, they're using stabilizers and things to mimic as if it's not a handheld shot because Star Trek is tending, particularly in that period, is tending to go for the smoother, slower moves. This is a fucking shaky cam shot where it's almost like the cameraman is affected by the pheromones and he's like, I gotta fucking look at the fucking ass crack and look at those legs.
It's definitely voyeuristic. For sure.
It's very voyeuristic. And, I think you could argue that probably the sincere intention was to make the audience feel and identify with what the men on the ship were going through. The problem with that is, first of all, that disincludes a huge proportion of the audience, the majority of females, plenty of men who either are not interested in seeing that or are, not turned on by that. And moreover, even for the men, the kind of heterosexual, cis men, even that is assuming that they're going to react the same way as the crew. And in the story, the crew is reacting that way partly because of pheromones.
That's a good point, is that they're expecting the audience to act in the same way
because
as the
that's
crew,
how they were
right.
reacting. Because that's to be, and I don't mean to criticize them, but I'm like, that Alan Croker, the way Archer was acting, you feel like that's how he was acting on set, with the shaky camera and I gotta fucking look at those tits. I gotta make it clear why Archer is going crazy because of those fucking tits. tits. You know, and it's weird.
Yeah.
Like, for lack of a better term, it comes off as weird. I
Yeah,
think
it kind of assumes that you're in on the
that's what it is.
on the
That's
on
a
the situation.
A much more succinct way of putting it is it's assuming that you're in on the gag because you are not only a heterosexual male in the audience, that's one of the assumptions, but you're a heterosexual male who literally loses fucking control if an attractive green woman comes walking by.
And this wasn't a connection to the audience so much, but the scene back at the gym, it was kind of like that kind of same in on it deal when Mayweather looked at Malcolm. I think it was Mayweather to Malcolm and said, it's like, dude, you see that? Or basically like, oh, dude, you feel what's out there or whatever. And Malcolm's like, oh, all too well or whatever. Basically, they're like, yeah, bro. Yeah. Did you catch those butts of those hot babes, you know?
The
and
bridge
it's like,
bros.
And like, they're just all in it together. Like, yeah, bro, that's how it is. And so as an audience member, I felt like I was supposed to be like kind of doing that too.
Yeah.
And it made me feel disgusting.
Yeah.
And the other thing is when
Early
you
2000s.
kind of look at when you dig deeper into it, the quote unquote progressiveness that they're projecting in this episode is, look at these men, how they're so progressive because all they're doing is becoming incredibly visibly horny and fucking up all their job functions and endangering the ship, but it's not like they're raping these women.
Right.
And it's upsetting because you think of that as being a lot of and I think this happens a lot in Enterprise. You could argue some of it's the prequel aspect and it's just an awkward way they presented it, but it feels like a step back from previous Star Trek where you would not see this type of behavior presented in the same way on TNG or Deep Space Nine or Voyager. It just would not happen that way. There are plenty of questionable things.
Yeah, that's a good point. That does seem like a very Enterprise specific kind of deal.
And a mid-2000s thing where there was some reactionary... I think there was some culture war stuff going on where it's kind of like, you know what, as long as we're not raping women, that means we're feminists.
Yeah.
Which is an argument.
It's an argument.
It's an argument to be made. I don't think it's progress.
0 is a percent. I want to call out a Tucker. Tucker calls them dampeners when there's some shit going down.
As opposed to dampers.
Dampers. He's like, blow out. He goes, blow the dampeners.
This is an ongoing debate, folks.
Dampeners.
Not a debate. It's
okay, the pedal on the piano,
that's a dampener.
is that a dampener?
Oh, do they call them dampers?
No, I don't think you call them a damper. No,
you call them a dampener.
Dampener. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's weird that
It's
they
a
call them
dampener pedal.
It's weird that they called them dampers to begin with. It makes you think it was like a typo, but like it's not. Probably.
We have textual evidence throughout the series of both dampers and dampeners for inertial dampers,
Just
inertial
keeping
dampeners.
count. Not an unofficial count because I don't know in my head at all how many I've.
Dan is lying. He knows exactly. He's got it all calculated. He just doesn't want to come off as creepy.
I used a text search AI to find out how many. When Archer is like gonna be bad, and all three women come out at the end, and they're all like, "Hey, we're gonna make you do bad things," and then you got what's his name, Harad. Harad. He's off on a ship, and they're like, "Hey, we're sexy, listen to us." And then like,
"Hey, Annie,
be sexy with us."
We're sexy, Annie.
Yeah. I thought it was humorous when Archer got shot by Trip Tucker,
Charles Trip Tucker III,
and his head kind of hits the chair. Except it hits like the back padding of the chair, and it's all humorous, and all just goes like scrunch. And it's like I don't know. There's something about that was very slapsticky. It's like when everyone else falls down, they're like, "Whoa!" And then he kind of rolls forward into this padding on the chair, and it just looks.
He's a captain.
It looks very humorous.
I think they could have done this storyline better on Lower Decks because Lower Decks they would have handled it a little differently, and I think one of the gags on Lower Decks would be that the men wouldn't be all sweaty and weird, but they would just all be walking around with visible erections, and it would be just hilarious and awkward.
Kelby would have been funnier.
Yes, Kelby would have been funnier.
So after they ended up beating Harad and he was flying away, Archer says on his log, he mentioned that Harad Sar was heading home with the Orion girls at very low impulse.
Yeah.
Why did he mention very low?
Slowly. His warp engines were off.
I think they damaged his
they
tanks.
fucked his shit up. He was just bragging there.
Partly that's the context of Enterprise, because on Enterprise they were constantly obsessed with the speed.
Yeah.
Right?
Because in
with
fucking
the
warp 5,
exactly.
50 years or whatever.
Getting from here to there. So
get out to
Getting from here to there.
get out to Neptune and back in 5 minutes.
12 parsecs.
Made the Kessel Run.
And then there was the funny exchange. It's not really funny. It was another kind of like ugh. When T'Pol goes, "We've learned something about the Orions," and then Malcolm's like, "Yeah, the women are in charge." Hey.
Get me some coffee, T'Pol.
They look like traditional media's depiction of enslaved people, except it's the other way around for some reason. Women in charge? Can you imagine? Oh. So yeah, that was kind of like, okay. T'Pol says, T'Pol comments twice on ship's configurations. The first time at the beginning of the at the beginning of the episode when they approached Harad's ship for the first time, she goes, she doesn't recognize the configuration of the ship on the intercept course. And then later on, when that Weasley little ship comes, that was where that scene that was just meant to make Archer look like a meanie. She goes, she doesn't say she doesn't recognize the configuration. She says it's an unknown configuration. Two different parts in the episode where she's referring to a ship that she doesn't know what the configuration is. Unknown configuration. So I guess it's just saying new ship. I'd never heard her. I just never noted her saying that ever.
You think the Vulcans already know everything because they're, they had Warp 5 and shit.
But they don't explore much.
Do you think she said that in other episodes? It's just, it's a weird way of wording it.
She's mentioned it.
They just don't explore that
They try to
much.
come up with different ways to say the same thing, which is we're meeting new things.
They don't read
new
the
people
stars.
out.
Oh, I didn't have a problem with it or nothing.
No,
I was
Well,
just
first of all, it sounded like you had a problem with it, and second of all, your defense of not having a problem with it sounded somewhat sarcastic.
you're right. You've cracked my code.
It's okay to have a problem.
What are we talking about next week?
Damn, are you fucking talking shit to me right now?
No.
Are you talking shit to me right now?
I'm absolutely not talking shit
No,
to you.
I'm just talking shit.
We haven't decided what we'll do next week, but we can always put it up on the...
I was more talking shit to
on
the
the
episode.
on the Twitter.
Yeah, I was just kidding, Jesse.
Any odds and ends? I think we got through the bulk of the story.
I think I did all my odds.
I think
and
I
ends.
just did those odds and ends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You did all your odds and ends. Well,
It's a booger ship, Orion booger ship.
the one odd and
Ryan Booker
end.
ship.
I mean, my odds and ends are rather small. The odds are small.
The nooks and
Ends,
crannies.
the nooks and crannies.
Never tell me the odds.
I'll tell you the ends though. First starbase. They're kind of scouting for a first starbase.
Oh, Berengaria. That's where they got them dragons.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they casually mentioned dragons. I thought
That's from TOS.
that was
Is it TOS?
it was hilarious.
I don't know. Is it?
I think
something.
I think that's one where Malcolm made a really great face when they talked about like these lizards that are over 200 meters
Yeah.
long.
He's always making great.
Yeah, he was just kind of like,
Malcolm Reed.
He was like this mixture of like that's bullshit, but also like I sure hope it's bullshit.
Malcolm Reed's one of my favorite characters.
Yeah, that was funny.
Oh, let's see. What does it say about Berengaria? It mentions this episode. It mentions some stuff in the Dominion War. How it's a strategic place.
Oh,
It's a
because of
strategic
this
system. Just more geographically, I think.
Oh well,
But
because it's got all that mollicinium. Magnesite?
no, that was different. No, they were going to
Yeah.
Berengaria, and then they were going to go to the Magnesite.
So the Berengaria was where
was
they
the
were thinking of
original.
putting a starbase because it was a nice place, except for the possible 200-meter long dragons.
I don't care about any of you.
According to Memory Alpha 2104, Vulcan science vessels surveyed Berengaria 7, but it doesn't reference any sort of episode until you get to 2154 with the Enterprise NX-1. So I don't know if I know that I have a book where it talks about different species around the galaxy, and it mentions the Berengarian dragon, but I don't know like what episode dealt with the Berengarian
you said
dragon,
you used
or
to-
what's I always assumed it was a TOS episode I never saw, but like I don't know.
Wait, you said you had a book that
Yeah, I have a book that talks about various aliens.
You got a book?
You got a book?
This motherfucker's got a
like
book.
I learned it from a book.
like one of those companion books, basically, that tell you about the
Yeah.
different. Oh, those are cool.
Yeah,
Those are pretty awesome.
I want to learn more about the bird.
it's called
people.
Worlds of the Federation. Yeah, it's got the bird people. It's got the Tholians. It's got everybody.
Does it have that 3-armed creature from TAS?
And from, and from Lower Decks.
No, it does. It is missing some stuff, and a lot of
They did their best.
the history it gives is different. There's sort of
Spurious.
off canon.
Negative. Affirmative.
What the hell? I've been meaning to lose a few pounds. Get light on our feet because our gravity's going away.
I like Trip. Trip was good in this episode.
Yeah, he's always pretty good.
But
Except when he had that boner that one time.
he what in the pilot? Was it the
with
pilot
T'Pol.
where he had the boner?
With the Paul when they were rubbing
And Archer too.
They were rubbing like the anti-radiation goo on each other or
Well,
whatever.
and that's where we've just the pilot of Enterprise is where again, and I think this is something
That was in 2001.
I could be wrong. I'll rely on others who are more familiar with the media landscape at the time, but I think there are other examples of this where there was a push to become, we say we term it as more progressive, but there's subsets of that, and one of them was to, avoid the over sexualizing of women and blah 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 blah. Making sure that female characters were shown to be in positions of power and all that other stuff. The problem was, I think a lot of these male Hollywood producers responded by saying, well, what we're going to do is we're going to just start sexualizing men and then it's okay. That was the idea. It was like, we can still sexualize the women as long as we also have Captain Archer take off his shirt and have his penis bulge just prominent, and then
equal
Connor
opportunity
Trenier.
objectification.
Exactly. That was a theory that was pursued for a while. And I think a lot of people were like, you're not entirely getting the point. It's fun. We do like seeing Archer with his shirt off and Mayweather with his shirt off. We would have liked to see more Reed with his shirt off. That's a perennial complaint we have about Enterprise. I think he took his shirt off once or twice.
It's not enough.
It is not enough. In the mind of a man, it is never enough.
Oh, I almost forgot that when I was looking up the first episode with the new fresh opening beat, season 3, episode 1, apparently there was nudity in that episode just because Netflix said there was nudity in it. And I'm curious what they mean by that.
Nudity.
Oh, season 3, episode 1?
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember now because I watched that recently.
Yeah.
Maybe it was Xindi nudity because there's a lot of Xindi stuff. So the third season is all like one big arc. It's quite a good arc. There's a few things in there a little problematic, but overall it's a good arc. And then the fourth season here is where we start seeing those kind of mini arcs. 3 to 4 episodes. I think I covered all of my odds and ends.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm G2G.
For the most
got
part. I guess the last thing was another thing of, there were 2 minor things. First of all, I felt like in Enterprise, the music, I already talked about kind of like some of the more unusual aspects of the music, but a lot of Enterprise, particularly season 3 and 4, you hear a lot of more, the horn sections are a little bit brighter and more aggressive, a little bit more militaristic, which I don't know, but it could be associated with what was going on in the time because, in 2003, there was the Iraq War started and there was a lot of military action. And I think Enterprise, it never became a pro-war show, but there was some influence about kind of the rah thing, and I think some of that shows up in the music becoming a little bit more militaristic. Not a negative thing necessarily, just sort of an observation. And the other thing I noticed that on my second time watching this through today was that going back to Kelby, when he's talking to Trip, he's never looking at Trip in the eyes. He's like looking at his lips or something. And if you look at his eye lines, like constantly. And I couldn't figure out if that was a choice by the actor, sort of an acting decision, or if the actor playing Kelby just could not handle being in the same room with Connor Trenier.
Yeah.
The charming, beautiful Connor Trenier, and just simply couldn't look at him in the eyes because he kept forgetting his lines or something.
He was probably unprepared for it. Like he didn't think he would react in the way that he would.
Yeah, I imagine Connor Trenier is the kind of person you go up and you talk to them, you shake their hand, and you look in their face, and all of a sudden you're just like,
yeah.
I don't know what to do. I don't know. You were so great as Charles Trip Tucker III.
It's like John Hamm. It's like John Hamm
it's like John Hamm. Yeah, it's how John Hamm affected
he's like
Stephen Toast.
The man
He's
is like crack.
Do you think the nudity was
Toast of London.
was a Xindi insectoid?
I hope so. Yeah. Insectoid. I'm all about not over-sexualizing things, but I will happily indulge in the over-sexualization of Xindi insectoid creatures. All day long. Yeah. Do they? It's a Is it a?
That's more of a bird. I
Lizards
think.
and birds have cloaca. I don't know what you call it on a.
They don't really have
on a Xindi insectoid.
Do they lay eggs and then squirt some juice out on the eggs?
Some kind of abdomen squirter.
Yeah. All right. I think that should do it
Abdomen squirter.
for
That's
us this week.
It's got Star Trek.
It has been Star Trek. We don't know yet what we'll discuss next week, but we're going to come up with something.
We'll keep you informed.
And we're going to throw it out there onto our social medias and webpage and all that. So
Maybe you guys could pick which one.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that's right. You just write in and tell us what you'd like to hear.
Tell us what you want.
But regardless of what it is, I can guarantee you this: it will be
Deep Space Nine.
It will be entertaining. It will be informative, and there's a high probability it will blow your fucking mind. And you don't want to miss out on that.
And it won't be silly.
It'll blow
no
our
silliness.
minds.
There will be no silliness.
You can listen to our minds getting blown
Yeah, and
right out the ears.
I will now pass it to my colleagues here to tell you how you can find out,
Was he talking
how you can
about us?
follow along.
I guess.
with what we're going to do next week and beyond. So, Dan, if they want to find us on social media, what would you suggest would be the best way they do that?
Well, Patrick, if they want to see us on social media, they can go to It's Got Star Trek on Twitter, Facebook, or they don't even need the @ symbol on Facebook.
Sunday, kids getting free.
They can do it on Instagram.
Instagram, that's right.
Our email is
Email.
feedback at itsgotstartrek.com. I sort of lost my...
Lost your mojo there.
Well, I lost the...
You injured your throat in making a weird sound.
I started with the... I'm a DJ.
Go, 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 go.
It's
I
got
ended with,
Star Trek.
106.7. Blah, blah.
Blah, blah, blah,
Blah, blah, blah, blah. So feedback at itsgotstartrek.com.
That's what I just said.
Yes, that's what Dan just said.
Why am I saying it if it's getting said again?
No, but repetition is
yeah.
important in Cardassian literature. And
Oh, that's a good
We do
point.
structure. People might notice. Okay, so this is our 61st episode.
That's how it works on the radio.
And if you really want to
Say
appreciate, what we're doing here, I recommend you go back to the beginning and you listen all the way through, and then you do it again and you do it again. And in that process of repetition, you will find that we repeat certain themes and comments and things over the course of those episodes, because we do believe in the ancient Cardassian literary tradition of repeating shit ad nauseum until the fucking point gets through. So that's our recommendation. If you want to learn more, you can also visit our website at www.itsgotstartrek.com. And in addition to just, being able to access the episodes there and get all our social media information and stuff if you've forgotten it already, you can also sort by TV series, right? So if you're only interested in checking out
that's cool.
Enterprise stuff or Discovery or TNG or whatever, you just click on the fucking menu and you'll figure it out. You're smart people. If you're listening to this show, you are either smart or you are asleep.
Just click it.
You're probably smarter than we are.
Both of those things could be, simultaneously true.
Click it or ticket.
Click it or take it. But yeah, you can go to itsgotstartrek.com, sort stuff and all that, get in contact with us, email us, Twitter us, Instagram us, Facebook us, do all that other cool jive shit.
Click the thing or we're going to make you sad sing.
Exactly. That's the old phrase goes, as the old saying goes.
Next week we can have
Stuck around for so long 'cause it's so
We do
good.
a pledge drive so we can get some more funding.
We should do a car wash.
Yeah, y'all come on
bikini
down
car
to the
wash.
car wash. Like we'll right out front, right out front of the studio.
Yeah.
Well, Dan, Jesse, and I will dress in sexy Orion outfits.
We will be
Yeah.
wearing not much. There will be hoses blasting.
I
And
wonder
it-
if a website
cold
sells
outside.
Orion pheromones.
I'm sure we could find something.
And if not, that is something that we could market.
We can find the chemical equivalent.
Can't you just get like elephant piss or something? Isn't that basically the same?
I think it's chemically the same. I think elephant piss, Orion pheromones.
Yeah.
And Delta brainwaves
Delta.
or whatever they use.
Yeah.
Oh, I forget why the Deltans were empathic or something. I think.
That's like the
Motion
picture, right?
Yeah.
It's
She was a Delta.
They're like bald or something.
Yep. Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with it.
And nothing wrong with that at all. Smooth.
Those dudes,
Nice and
those
smooth.
dudes in the cage were so smart that their brain pulsated with blood.
With the womp womp.
That's pretty good.
I mean, like visibly so.
Yeah. Less sexy though.
Telosians.
Yeah, that's right. Telosians.
Telosians. All right. Well, that'll do it for us this week, and we look forward to talking at you again next week. In the intervening time, check us out on social media to see what we're going to be talking about next week. But you know what? Tune in, even if you don't find out. It'll be entertaining. You'll enjoy it one way or the other.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Have a good evening. Goodbye.
Bye.
The injectors feed into the dilithium chamber.
That's where the matter and antimatter mix.
That's right.
The crystals let you control the reaction.
That's right.
Lieutenant, talk to you a second.